how to fetch the records from the database using a simple query interface, okay, and how we can add some elements in the select list, okay, and how we need to fetch the results if we have a select list and if we don't have a select list. Those things we have discussed yesterday, okay. Today we are going to discuss some more things about the query interface, how we can do the actions in the query interface now, okay. Now as we told, query is a interface which is used to fetch multiple records from the database, okay. And in the query, let's consider like we go for the database. Hundred, 400, two records are there. Let me try to insert few more records. Oh, table another table you students को person है then drop this no okay no okay let me insert some 5 records here. Sorry, forgot to. Sit. Yes, I have created one more. I have created only one more. Let me create one more. Let me create one more row. Already 400 is there. I have created some rows. Let me select the values. Let me comment the records. Comment the records and let me select the records. There are 7 records exist in a specific table h1_person. Now, in this person_hbm.xml, now there is no age, so I'll remove this property. I'll comment out this property just because that doesn't exist in the database. Now, what I'm trying to do is just I list out the person records where ID is greater than 300, where ID is greater than some ID, some value, some ID value. Let's consider like this is, here I am outputting these values, but this is coming from the database. Sorry, this is coming from the user interface, like a screen or anything else. But I am hardcoding it here. Okay. Now, just let me not go for the select list. Just from person where ID is greater than some value. Okay. Now, need not to do this. Just I'll go for list of person records and I'll print the values. Committing is not required. Okay. Now what I'm doing is I'm having an ID to search and I'm fetching all the records where the ID is greater than some value. Okay. Now let me execute this application. So just it is printing the value 400 Sharath, 500 Prasad, 600 Srinath and 700 Rajesh. So these are the values that are ready. Let me consider that I want to fetch the records where ID is greater than 300 and name is Rajesh. So what I will do is plus and plus and name equal to open single quote I will give the name to search and close the single quote, then it will form the query. So at the end the query will be formed like this: from person where ID equal to greater, where ID is greater than 300 and name equal to in single quote what is the name to search? Rajesh. This query will be formed. Okay, this query will be formed. Just because these are values are dynamic and these values come from other source, either UI or anything. Okay, just so I am passing the value. Since ID is integer, I need not to bother about that. Directly I can give. Since name is a string, I should give it in a single quotes. Understood? Now, if I execute the query, is giving expected result? Is giving expected result? Yes or no? Yes. But the problem here is, okay, the string value should be changed again and again. Okay, it's not a better way to do just because here how many string objects are created? This is one, again this is one, again this is one, again this is one, again this is one, and again this is one. Because of this appending the string to the query, more string objects will be created and so it will degrade the performance. As well as constructing a query like this, okay, it will not be easy to be maintained. Okay, we cannot maintain it easily. Let's consider like if you want to add one more new parameter. Let's consider like in the where next after 10 days age also will be appended to the table. So if I want to perform a search event based on the age, then what should I do? Again I should append some value here. Okay, so it's not an advisable way. Constructing the query through a string format or constructing the query through appending the values to the query is not a correct way to do. And if you want, let's consider like if if age is greater than 300, if age is greater than 300, then go for something else. If age is less than 300, then go for some other logic. If that is the case, again we need to write some condition. Okay? So for those kind of situations or for any kind of situation, appending the query values to the query is not at all a advisable approach. It's less maintainable and it's complex to understand. So what we do in general is if there are some elements or some columns in the where clause, okay, there are some columns in the where clause, then what we do is the values of the specific columns will be given as named parameters. Just observe the difference how named parameters will be and how a normal query will be. Just the same thing I am doing through a named parameter. A very important concept, what is named parameter, why it is used? A named parameter is preceded by semicolon. A named parameter will be preceded by a semicolon. Sorry, colon. A named parameter will be preceded by a colon. In Hibernate query, in a SQL query, if anything is preceded by a colon means it is a named parameter. So this is person name and person ID. These two are considered to be named parameters. Rather than setting the values directly in the query, I am using the named parameters. There are two named parameters here, person ID and person name. All the named parameters in SQL queries should be preceded by a colon. Okay, so now how we can set the values to the named parameters means in the query itself. Set parameter, name is name of the parameter, the value is value. And all the parameters should be set. And the value. person ID is ID for search, person name is name to search. Just we'll give some named parameters and we'll set the values for the named parameters. That's it. Which one looks better for you? Is it the named parameters or appending the values to the same query? Which one will be more appealing? Is it the named parameter or appending the value to the query? Named parameters will be always better. We can maintain them easily. We can identify them easily. We can set the values based on the condition. Like, for example, if something, then set parameter value 100. Else, set some other value. Okay? Those conditional based parameter setting also can be done very easily. So, always when we are setting some parameter values in the where clause, okay, then it should be a named parameters as per the Hibernate standards. Okay, we should not build up the query like this. Many of the people, even some people in the industry, those who have 4 or 5 years experience, will build the query like this, which is not at all advisable. We have concept of named parameters and we should use like this. If we want to set or if we want to filter the records based on some criteria, okay, if you want to filter the records based on some such conditions, okay, the values of the search, okay, this is the project class attribute name. Name is the project class attribute name, and this is the named parameter which should be set using query.setParameter. Okay, set parameter of the name of the parameter, and the second is the value of the parameter. Okay, and finally a query something like this will be generated. But we won't do that, okay, just because for us there is a chance of doing many mistakes if we create the query ourselves. So we set the named parameters and Hibernate itself will generate the query as per the named parameters. Okay, now let me execute this application. So it's fetching the expected values. Okay. Now let's consider like I have used a named parameter and I did not set any value to the named parameter. Okay, I have used a specific named parameter, but I did not set any value to the named parameter. Now, will it take the default value or will it give an exception? What do you think? If I am not setting a value to the named parameter, will it take a default or will it give an exception? Understood my point? If I don't give, see here in the SQL query I have two named parameters, person ID and person name. I am setting the person ID but I am not setting the person name just because I have commented that. Okay, so if I don't set a value to the named parameter, will it take any default or will it give an exception? Okay, let me see. Is it taking the default value? No, it's giving an exception. So, these named parameters will never have any default values. Whatever the named parameters defined in the SQL query, okay, should be given a value by using query.setParameter. We should define values to all the named parameters using query.setParameter. Otherwise, it will give out.hibernate.query exception. Just note down the exception and the purpose of the exception. Note down the exception and the purpose of the exception. Query exception will come if the query format is incorrect. For example, if you give a named parameter in the SQL query, but the named parameter is not set using set parameter. Query exception will be arise when the SQL query is improper. For example, okay, we have named parameter in the SQL query, but the value to the named parameter is not set. Understood? So, if there are 10 named parameters, we should provide values to all the named parameters. There is no concept of default value for named parameters. Which one?
Actually, it's a type of function, but we are not declaring
Person ID? No, here the parameters in the SQL query need not to be, it's not a variable. It's not a variable in the Java class. It's a parameter in the SQL query, which is in the control of Hibernate. We need not to define any data type for the named parameter. Just it is a name, it is some name. Even I can give Rajesh or even I can give Malesh here. Okay, just it's some name. That name will be replaced by a value. That's it. Understood? This is just a name. This is not data type, this is not something else. This is just a name. At runtime, this name will be replaced by some value. That's it. And how we can differentiate between a attribute and a named parameter means using equivalent. Understood? This doesn't have any significance. Okay? Except that it's a name that we represent the parameter. Okay? And what else? Okay? So we can set named parameter, or there is even another method, set parameter list, where we can set list of parameters also. Okay? Set parameter list, where we can set a list of parameters. Okay? That we'll see how a list of parameters will be set and where it will be used. Okay? And let's consider like I have set a parameter, person name, but it is not used in the list. It's not specified in the list. This is the reverse case. In the earlier case, we have seen that a parameter exists in the SQL query, but it is not defined. Okay? It's not given any value. But now, a parameter is given a value, but it is not defined in the SQL. Okay? Let me see how it will behave. Is it giving any exception? Yes or no? Yes. What is the exception? Query parameter exception. Query parameter exception. Just because one of the parameters that is set is not defined in the query. Okay? Either way it is exception. If the parameter is defined in the query but not given a value through set parameter, in that case it will give an exception, as well as if the query is set through set parameter but doesn't exist in the query. In that case, in the second case, it will give a query parameter exception. Okay? In that case, it will give a query parameter exception. Give me 1 minute. Yes, a query parameter exception will be raised if a named parameter is defined using set parameter method, but that named parameter doesn't exist in the HTTP query. Okay, either way it is a exception. Understood? Now let's consider I'll go for a list where I'll give you a bunch of IDs like 200, 300, 500, 600. Okay? If I give you a bunch of IDs, okay? If the record, okay? The ID of the record matches at least one of these IDs. Okay? If the ID of the record matches with at least one of these values, then that record should exist in the result list. Understand my point? If one of these values exists as an ID of a record, then that record should exist in the result list. Then how you write a SQL query for this? Let's consider I have a list of 1,000. There will be something like in. Okay. So in general, SQL how will do? Select star from some table where person underscore ID in 200, 300, 400, 500, like this. Just we will get a query with in. Okay. Then how we can write the same in query in HQL? Okay. The same in query in HQL can be written as in in the parenthesis. In the parenthesis we'll give a named parameter, person ID list. And then what we do is let me generate a list. Since ID is integer, I have given list of integer. $300, $500, $700. So just I need to pick up the record if the ID matches at least one of these values. So I'll give set parameter. Then if the parameter value contains a list, then we should use a method set parameter list. When we use set parameter list method means if the query contains a in parameter. Okay, the query contains a in parameter, then we should go for a set parameter list where we should give the parameter name and the list of parameter. What is the list of values? It is list. Understood what I have done? So I need to pick up all the records from person where ID is in this values. So we can easily set the values. Otherwise, constructing this query will become very problematic. We need to iterate using for loop. We need to again append comma value, comma value, comma value. This will take a number of iterations. So this could be always a better way to do that.
If we use the OR operator, then it will also work.
It will also work, but how many ORs will you put? If there are 1000 records, how many ORs you need to put?
Yes, sir. But what is the internal process of the key operator? So that it makes the difference of OR.
What it will do means it will make some kind of search mechanism. Okay, there are several search algorithms. Internally, each and every database will have its own search algorithm. So, what it will do means when it has a record, it will take the ID value and it will search in the in list by its own search algorithm. So, it will pick up whether the record matches with that list or not. If it doesn't match with the list, then it will ignore and it will go to the next record. So now the parameter person name doesn't exist, so let me comment this. Just how do you set a named parameter list means just give the named parameter in parentheses, give the named parameter in parentheses. Okay, here I have given the person ID list in parentheses and set the named parameter value using set parameter list. When do we use named parameter list means when we are writing a query with a in parameter. Okay. Understood? When in it should be used and how in can be achieved in Hibernate. Understood? So, just the viewer may not ask the question directly. They may ask indirectly, like let's consider like I have 1000% records, 1000 ID values in a list. Okay, I should fetch all the records from person table where at least one match is found in this list. The same question can be asked in any way, indirectly or directly. But whatever the way that he asks, we should understand the point. What is his requirement? Okay, and just compare your knowledge with the requirement, and just you can find which one is a better approach to do this. If that is his requirement, we should not use a simple query parameter. Okay, we should go for a parameter list just because he has many records and at least any one of them exists. Okay, if at least one match is found, then we should pick up the record in the result. So if that is a requirement, we should go for in. Okay, so like that we need to select a specific approach. So it is fetching all the records where ID is in 100, 300, 500 and 700. Understood? This is how we can set a named parameter and a named parameter with a list value. Understood? And now there are 4 records fetched from the database. Now, using the query, we can set some value that now how many records are fetched here? How many records are fetched? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I am setting the maximum results as 3. I am setting the maximum results as 3. Now let me execute the application. Whether the first three are fetched or the last three are fetched. First three or last three? First three records are fetched. Okay. If we want to restrict the result set size, then we will go for set max results. Then if you want to set the first result, let's consider like I may have 1000 records in the database. In those 1000 records, okay, now I am fetching all the records with person ID as person ID in the list. With that match, I may have some 1000 records in the database. I may have 1000 records in the database, but I need to display only first 25 or first 50. I need to display only first 25 or first 50. Then what I will do? Means I'll set the maximum result of something, some value, first 50 or something. Let's consider like I should display second 50. There are 200 records. I need to display the second 50. First 50 means 1 to 50. Second 50 means 51 to 100. Then how I will display? How I will achieve that? If there are 200 records in my result set, but I want to display 51 to 100, then how I will do that? Set first result 51 and set max result. Set max result, will it be 50 or will it be 100? Will it be 50 or 100? Why it should not be 100? The maximum possible records are only 50. My requirement is to display 51 to 100. That means maximum possible records are 50. So I'll set max results as 50. I set first result as 51. So I'll get 51 to 100. Understood? That's how the first result and max result will be achieved. So okay, 300, 500 and 700. But in case of this first result, the index will start from 0. In case of the first result, the index will start from 0. Okay. So since I have given 1, what happens? It will pick up the second, third and fourth record. The index in case of first result will start from 0. So if you want to get the first record to 50th record, what should be the first result value? Understood my point? If I want to get first to 50th record, then what should be my first result? 0. Okay? 0 and the max result should be 50. Understood my point? So if I set the first result as 0, then it will be the first three values 100, 300, 500. Okay? If I give the first result as 2, how many records will be refetched here? If the first result is 2 and max result is 3, then how many records will be fetched? 2 records?
There is a 3 only, but start with the record 3. If it is not there, it is not there. And they are leaving the
500, 700. How many records are displayed? 700. Okay. Is it set max results or set min results? If it is like the maximum retail price is 700, okay, is it sure that he should sell for 700? He should not sell the product more than 700 rupees. He may sell even for 300 also. Understood? The same concept will work here also. Maximum 3 records. Here in this case, maximum 3 records should be fetched. That doesn't mean that the record size should be exactly 3. Understood? So, setmax result specifies the maximum records, the limit of maximum records to be fetched. It can be the result, the records, the number of records fetched from the database may be equal or may be less than the maximum results. But it will not be greater than maximum results. If there are 1000 records, only the specified records will be fetched. Understood? Okay. Now let's consider like if you go for a Google page. Okay. And if I go for Google and if I search Hibernate in the text field. Okay. Then there might be thousands of websites where Hibernate is there. Okay. Now let's consider like I'll search Hibernate in Google and press enter. Okay. If I press enter, I'll get some records in the page. Then let's consider 1000 matches are there. Okay, 1000 URL matches are there. Okay. Now will all the 1000 records displayed in the same page? How many records will be displayed in one page? 20 or something like that, some number. Let's consider like it is 20. Okay. That means how many pages will be there? How many pages will be there totally? See, there are 20 records for one page. There are 20 records for one page, and the total number of records matching with that such criteria is 1000. How many pages will be there? 50 pages will be there. Now, let's consider like 1000 records are there, and 50 pages are there, and for each and every page I am displaying 20 records. Now, I'll tell two approaches. Just to tell which one is the better approach. In the first approach, what I will do is I will load all the 1000 records at a time, and on some Java logic or using some user UI logic like JavaScript or some other logic. Okay. When I click on next and previous, I will navigate to the next and previous records. Let's consider like I have 1000 records. I will fetch all the 1000 records at a time. And navigation between one page to another page will happen through some JavaScript code. That's one approach. The second approach is, okay, first I will display only the first 20 records, and whenever the user clicks on next, then again I will go to the server and I will fetch the 20 records specific to that page. And when the user clicks on previous, again I will go to the server and I'll get the records specific to that page. Which approach do you think it is better, the first or the second? Just tell frankly your opinion. You may think that first is better and you may think that second is better. Which one do you think it's better? Understood my two approaches? The first approach is all the 1000 records I will fetch at the same time and I will put in the UI. And using some UI logic, I'll navigate from one page to another page. That's one approach. The second approach is I'll fetch only first 20 records for the first page. When I click on next or the number, there will be an index of the page 1, 2, 3. Directly we can go to the 10th page. If I click on 10th page, I'll fetch again. I'll send a request to the database, and I'll fetch the 20 records specific to that 7th page, and I'll display on the 7th page. Then which approach do you better? Fetching all the 1000 records at a time, or fetching the page specific 20 records whenever it is required? Then if we want to go page specific, what happens? We need to make database interaction whenever we need switch from one page to another page. Then which one do you think? See, if you go for the first approach, we are making a database interaction only once for all the 1000 records. If you go for the second approach, for each and every navigation we should make a database interaction. Which one do you think it is better? First approach or the second approach? If you go to the first approach, Unnecessarily, even we are not displaying in the same page, we need to fetch all the 1000 records. We are not sure that the user goes to the 1000th page or 7th page or 8th page. We are not sure that user will use all the 1000 records. Even all the records are not used by the user. We are displaying or we are fetching the 1000 records. But here, in this approach, we are fetching the 1000 records, but we are fetching only once. In the second approach, the positive thing is we will fetch only 20 records. The negative aspect is whenever we are navigating from one page to another page, we should make a database interaction. Then, by comparing the positives and negatives, which approach do you think it is better? The first one or the second one? First one or second one? Always the second one will be preferred. Just because carrying 1000 objects in our server will eat up our memory. If we load 1000 objects at a time and put in our server, what happens? The JVM memory size will be occupied like anything. So even other processes will be slowed down. So we won't load any objects like that. We won't load bunch of objects like that. We only fetch the information whenever it is required. Let's consider like we fetch 1000 records. Maybe or may not be used by the user. Why to fetch 1000 records if it is not used? And if we do that, what happens? The memory will be occupied by all those 1000 objects and other processes will be slowed down. Understand? So, we only fetch the records that we require. Yes, it is additional database interaction. Even it is additional database interaction, we have made that interaction just because the user sent a request that please fetch me the 7th page. So the user will be okay if we need to wait for 1 second to get the results. The user perspective also, if we are on the first page, and if I click on the 7th page, I may not think that it should be displayed on the fly. Okay? I can wait for 1 second, which is enough for fetching the records from the database and displaying them on the UI. Understood? So always the second approach is better. How you can achieve that second approach in Hibernate? How you can achieve that in Hibernate? Understood the second approach? Then how do I achieve that in Hibernate? Max results will not change. Only for once we set the max results. But by using for loop, why do you use for loop here? See, if you use the for loop, here this class will be triggered by some UI. Understand my point? If you use a for loop, what happens? In the same request, you are fetching all 1000 records. Then why do you are telling in such a way that the performance of the application will be degraded as well as the performance database interaction also degraded. So what I will do is, let's consider like I am displaying the records on the home page. By default, what I will do is, I will take two attributes, int first index otherwise we'll take it as a page index, number of records per page. Let's consider like this 20. Now page index equal to, by default the page index I'll make it as 0. By default it will be like this. Okay? Now the page index is 0 and the maximum result is 20. And first I'll set the page index as 0 and the maximum result is 20. Okay, let's consider like the user has clicked on the 7th page. Okay, then what I'll do, I'll make the page index as 7 or 6. Page index is 7, then here the index should be 6. So I'll send 6 as a value and I'll filter this records. But the maximum result will not change, but the first result will change from 0 to 6. The same query will be executed, but what Hibernate will do means Hibernate will fetch only the records on the 7th page. That means something like 20, the maximum result is 20, and if we are fetching the records on the 6th page means some 120 to 140 records. Okay, the records in the index 120 to 140. Okay, like that we achieve this in Hibernate. Just the back that concept is called as pagination. We call that concept as, rather than displaying all the records in the same page, if we span them into multiple pagination, the concept is called as pagination. Okay, the logic related to pagination in Hibernate can be written using set first result and set max result. Can you?
That is only the thing.
Just, and do I need to tell once again?
When whatever we have to market is paying the 20, you are as per the record, as per the related index of state. Then what the internal that is
See, in the back end, let's consider like, by default I'm searching for Hibernate in Google. What Google will do, it should display the first page. By default, any page, any application will display the first page. Then what should, in that case, what should be the first result value? First page, what should be the page index? 0. Okay, and the maximum result will be 20. And the records will be fetched, and the list of records will be fetched to percentage, and percentage list will be sent to the UI. We will render that value and we will display them.
click the next page.
If I click on the next page, what happens? What is the current page ID?
That is the 1.
1. So I will go for 2.
Then there will be some variable who will display
Who will be?
like 1, 2, index.
Yeah, that's what page index, right?
Okay, itself implementation as
Yeah. See, when we go for the UI, from UI one value will be sent. That value will be coming to the Java class, and in the Java class we will modify the values for the person equal to person minus 1. So now it will be, index will be, if the page number is 1, then here the index will be 0. If the page number is 2, here the index will be 1. We will write some business logic later.
because sir, initially I was thinking that as a data and the game, I was thinking we should have taken some variable who will be taken input from the next navigation, and it will be one of the switch cases. And again, I was thinking
Okay.
it will be just taking the switch case, and before the break, we just take the condition whether the user clicking the next page or not. If clicking, then we again will do the code switching.
Okay, it should not be like that. Okay. It will be like that when you are in education, but when you come to the industry, we will think everything in a practical manner. Even if you learn Java in MTech also, even I am teaching now, and even if you are learning something here, it's completely different. It will become completely different when you go for the industry. Even you learn Java from me, even if I am teaching you a very practical manner, you won't think that much practical when you are there as a student. But when you go for the industry, you will be there in a environment. You will be there in a real-time environment where you will be interacting with the clients and you will be finding their needs, and you will be thinking of the best ways of doing or best ways of achieving the client needs. Then you will think, yeah, this is the best way rather than doing this. It will come by experience. Okay, it's not a bad thing of that. It will be like that. Okay, for any student. Okay, that's how the pagination can be achieved in the backend by Hibernate. Okay, and There are several methods in the query where we can set the values. Shimon, local, they are not required. Character set, double entity. Just this fetch size directly tells how many records should be fetched. Okay? And local not required. Max results that we have discussed, parameter list is okay. Okay, right now these things are fine, and now where are we writing these SQL queries? We are writing these SQL queries directly in the Java application. Okay, but we should not write, as per standards, we should not write any query in the Java application. Java application should contain pure Java code. It should not contain any queries or something like that. But if you don't write the queries here, where we can write the queries? Means we can write the queries in a XML file. But when we write the queries in XML file, how we can fetch the queries in the Java application? Understood, Madam? In general, we won't write any query in the Java application. Either SQL or HQL, we won't write any query in the Java application. Okay? But if you don't write any query in the Java application, from where we write? Where do we write the queries? And let's consider like if we have written the queries in an XML file, then how we can fetch that queries into the Java application using Hibernate. That we'll discuss. But before discussing that, okay, we can make use of Hibernate even to execute some raw SQL queries. Raw SQL queries means like native SQL queries. We call them as native SQL queries. That means SQL queries that can directly hit the database. Okay, we can use Hibernate to execute native SQL queries also. What is a native SQL queries means? The normal SQL query that we can execute in the database. Okay, let's consider like this is my native SQL query. Select star from HCO underscore person. Okay, this is my native SQL query. This native SQL query can be executed in Hibernate. Okay, this native SQL query can be executed from Hibernate. But in order to execute a native SQL query using Hibernate, while creating the query object, we should use a method create SQL query. This is also a very important point for interviews. How I can execute a native SQL query or a normal SQL query or a raw SQL query using Hibernate means we can execute that, but while creating the query, we should go for method create SQL query. Just what I will do is, even we can use named parameters. The same thing I can achieve in I can use named parameters even for native SQL queries in Hibernate. In Hibernate, we can use named parameters even for native SQL queries. It's not something like we should use named parameters only for HQL queries. We can use named parameters even for native SQL queries. Okay, now let me directly print the values. Now it will not be a records of person project class just because it's a native SQL query. It was a if it was what we call a HQL query, then it will have written directly the values. But now let me print the values like this. Just it's giving some records. Okay, it's giving some records, but for that records for array we don't have Java.lang string overridden. Sorry, we don't have equals method overridden, so it will give class name at the rate hexadecimal representation. If you want to get the values, just iterate the values using a for loop, and we can print the values. Understood? If you want to get the values, just iterate the values, iterate the elements using a for loop, so that you can get the values. But we can execute. The concept here is we can execute native SQL queries in Hibernate by using a query object. Okay, that too by using a query object. If you want to execute a native SQL query, we should go for a method create SQL query. Okay, and even for a even for a native SQL query, we can set named parameters or named parameter list or anything. The rest of the thing is the same, except that in place of create query we use create SQL query. That's it. Okay, and now let me go back to the previous thing where I can configure the SQL queries in XML file. Where I can configure the SQL or HQL queries in the XML file, and we can make use of them in the Java application. Then how we can do that? Let's see. Now let's consider like this is my SQL query. I need to configure this SQL query. Okay, in XML file. Sorry. Where I can configure this SQL queries means in the HBM file itself we can configure the SQL queries. Okay, but using what is the tag? We use the tag query. We'll give the name. Okay. Okay, we'll give the query and we'll give the query here. So we are not developing any SQL or SQL query in the Java class. Okay, just we configure the SQL or SQL query in the HBM files and we can use the same. Okay, just in place of create query, in that case, if you configure the queries in HBM file, okay, in place of create query, we should go for get named query. The name of the query. Okay. If we configure the SQL query in a HBM file, SQL or SQL query in the HBM file, okay, then that query is said to be a named query. The query that we configure in a HBM file is said to be a named query, just because that query has a name, and using that name only we can create a query object in Hibernate. Okay, the SQL query will be configured in a HBM file surrounded by a name. The name is fetch person by ID, and we use that name to get that query into the Hibernate query object. But if we are using a named query, then the query object should be generated using a method get named query. Create query is for if you use a SQL query in the application. Create SQL query method is for using in the application if you want to execute a native SQL query. But we use get named query if we have configured that query inside a Hibernate mapping file, and if you want to use that query, the query that is configured in a Hibernate mapping file is said to be a named query. Okay. In order to access that named query in the application, in the Java application, we use the method get named query to create the query object. Get named query of the name of the query. Okay. Oh, do you want to write this syntax? In the HBM file, we will configure that in the Hibernate mapping tag, not in the class tag. It will be there in the Hibernate mapping tag. Okay. Now, like a named query, we can even configure a named SQL query using this is the name of the query. The corresponding SQL query will be like this. Okay. And to execute a HQL query or a SQL named query. To execute a named HQL query or a named SQL query, we use the same method, get named query. To execute either a named SQL query or named HQL query. Named HQL query can be configured using query tag. Named SQL query can be configured in SQL query tag. Okay? Either if we want to use a named HQL query or a named SQL query. Okay? We use the same method, get named query. But for creation in in the class, what we do? Create query and create SQL query. We use different methods. But if it is a named SQL query or a named SQL query, the method is the same. Get named query. Okay? Oh. Now, here you have to fetch multiple records from the database using Hibernate. Okay, there are two approaches. In the at the initial point of time itself, I told there are two approaches to fetch multiple records from the database. One is using a query interface. What is the second one? Using a criteria interface. Okay, we have seen several examples where we can use a query interface to fetch multiple records from the database. In the same way, there is another approach for fetching multiple records from the database, that is using a interface named criteria. Let us see how we can make use of criteria interface to fetch multiple records from the database. Okay? Let me so now I have a configuration. Now let me see how we can go for a criteria interface. The criteria in org.hibernate package. Criteria is there in org.hibernate package. Criteria is also an interface. In the session, we'll give a method create criteria. We'll give the class name. What is the class name? What is the Pojo class name that we are using? Person. Dot. We'll create a criteria. Okay. In criteria, we won't use any queries. We won't write any queries in criteria, either SQL or HQL. Okay. We can directly use the Pojo class. That's it. Okay. Just what we'll do is criteria list. Now the same thing can be achieved in query using query using then which one do you think it is better or simple? Which one do you think it is better or simple? Criteria is moreover a Java related thing. Even query also will use the POJO object information, but the format will be of a query. Here, in case of criteria, we can achieve that using a Java methods. Let's consider like I want to select only 2. I have some 10 columns. Among those 10 columns, I should select only 2. How I'll do this means I'll achieve that through a query in case of query interface. But in criteria, I can achieve that using a Java method. Let's consider like I need to go for a where clause, where ID is greater than 200. Then how I can achieve that in query means we use that SQL query. But in criteria, we can achieve this through using Java methods. So criteria is a pure Java related interface. So using criteria, whatever the thing that we want to achieve, we can achieve through the methods of the criteria. Either by group by or order by or where clause or the select list, everything is through Java methods. But in case of query interface, we will achieve that through SQL queries. In most of the cases, many of the developers will prefer to use criteria only, just because it is more or less Java oriented and it will be very clean. Just because we are using methods and we know which method is used, which method is not supposed to be used and all. We may do something wrong with the query syntaxes, or some of the query syntaxes may not be acceptable by some of the databases. But criteria is a purely Java oriented one. Whatever the thing we want to achieve, we achieve them through using some what we call Java methods. So it's pure Java oriented criteria. Criteria is purely Java oriented. Now let's consider like I want to apply some restrictions. Okay. Okay. If you want to achieve the same thing using criteria, okay, what we'll do is we'll go for this, whatever the elements or whatever the properties that exist in the where clause. In database terminology, that we call them as restrictions. By default, all the records will be fetched, but in that fetching we are putting some restrictions. Yes, only the records with ID greater than 200 should be fetched. That is a restriction for the result set. So the elements that we put in the elements or the conditions that we put in the where clause are said to be restrictions. Okay, so we add some restriction. For greater than we have GT. For criteria we add restrictions. So I am adding restrictions to the criteria so that the ID value should be greater than 200. How we can add restrictions to a criteria means using restrictions. Using a class named restrictions. In restrictions there is a method GT which is used for something like a restriction which is of type greater than. Restrictions can be any type, like greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to, in. There are several types of restrictions. Now here we need not to write the named parameter. Directly we can relate the value to the post attribute. There in case of SQL query, again we should represent that using a named parameter, and it will be confusion which name should be used for which value should be set for which parameter. But here directly we are integrating the value to the parameter. So for these kind of advantages, in general people will go for criteria only. Directly we are combining or we are appending, okay, the name parameter value to the parameter name. So it will be easy to analyze what is the value, search value for the specific parameter. If you use named queries, what happen? Sorry, if you use SQL queries or SQL queries, what happen? What will happen means we'll go for some parameters at some place. We'll define the parameters at this place, and we set the values for parameters at some other place. So it will be confusion, like what is the value for a specific parameter? We need to search here and there, here and there. So it will be confusion. So here in case of criteria, what we do? We set the parameters, and at the same place we set even the values also. So it will be very easy to analyze. Okay. Likewise, let me execute this first. Sorry, here I did not give the attribute name equal to, just it was my fault, I did not give the name, or might be I have to remove that, but so here we are going for some values 400, 300, 500, 600 and 700. Okay, and let's consider that we want to go for equal to, and if you want to add another condition, then I will add another restriction. Where name is equal to Rajesh. Here and name equal to okay. The same thing I can achieve by using other ways. They are using criteria or a query. So the result will be the same, and the backend generated query will be the same, but the way of achieving is different. Okay, understood how we can make use of criteria to fetch multiple results? Okay, almost it's the same, but the way of creating the criteria and the way of adding the elements in the select list, the way of adding the elements in the where clause, that will be different. But we should know how we can do that using criteria and how we can do that using query. Okay, and there are several things in criteria to be discussed. Okay, First, we'll discuss about criteria tomorrow, and then we have a very important advantage of Hibernate is association mapping. Okay, how we can associate one object to another object. Let's consider like person will be there and address will be there. How we can associate person to address in Hibernate? What are the different ways we can do that? Okay, that we'll discuss tomorrow. It's one of the best advantages of Hibernate. Associations is one of the best advantages of Hibernate. So it's very important for interviews. If anybody asks, or if you are going for any Hibernate interview, means it's pretty much sure that there will not be even a single question, there will not be even a single interview without the question of associations. Definitely, if you go for Hibernate interviews, at least one question will be there with associations. So it was that much important. Be concentrated. Okay? But tomorrow, first we'll discuss some more things about our criteria. Okay? For the first half an hour, then we'll start with this associations. Let's assemble at the same time 6. Okay?